Yeah, let's go.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for another fab turnout. So thank you, everybody, for coming along. I don't know if you've seen the fancy new logo that was chosen by the group at the last meeting. So when we do the follow-up email, I'll attach those both as a square, transparent background and a circular one as well. So if you want to use them on anything, it might be useful to use in funding bids or stuff like that, you are more than welcome to do so. We did set up the Facebook group, but we've not been able to set it up so that you can join as your organisation. So some people have joined as their own profiles, but we've actually already, sort of within a few days of setting up the new Twitter account, got more followers on there. So do feel free, if you're on Twitter, to @ConnectingWF. Tag us into anything you post on Twitter, and we'll reshare it onto the Connecting Wakefield page. Hashtag ConnectingWF is something I just made up this morning, so we'll see.
Did you?
I know, I don't know where I'm going. So, there's the agenda. A couple of great speakers this morning, so thank you to Kerry and Helen. I've seen your presentations. I already know they're going to be really, really beneficial to the group. So before we go into those, we're just going to ask, so that these ladies know who you're talking to, a very, very quick kind of speed intros, a very Scylla style, who are you and where are you from? If you are one of the new VCSE advocates, then also please tell us what board you're sitting on, and then what we'll do is then hopefully have some time at the end for people to ask any questions about that, as well as everything else. Okay, so, and then we'll finish up sort of confirming the August meeting. Okay, so Craig, do you want to go first? I haven't got a stopwatch.
Really quick anyway. So I'm Craig, I'm from Reflection, Yorkshire. We provide practical and emotional support to vulnerable men, primarily. These guys are accessing our homeless accommodation service and undertaking a mandatory abstinence-based substance misuse treatment programme. So we'll also look at finding a meaningful thing to do with the time. Part of that is adjunctive sport and exercise, outdoor activities, which I kind of take the lead on. We've also got other alternative activities like creative writing and art, and they just now started branching out into what's the word for it? I've just told you a minute ago as well, and it's completely lost my mind. Diversionary activity, that's the one. So they're now started to go into schools, start to work with youths as well. He'll tell you more about it, he's just on his way in.
Brilliant, thank you. Kerry?
Hi everybody, I'm Kerry Murphy. I work in the Council of Public Health. I'm Public Health Lead for Health Inequalities and Poverty, which means lots of work around inclusion health groups, people who are marginalised in some way. Thank you for the invite here today.
Thank you very much. Helen?
Hi, I'm Helen, I'm from Nova. I work mostly on the third sector framework, which I'll be talking more about later on.
Paul Harris from St Giles Food Share in Pontefract, providing an affordable food project called the Pantry Club and holiday feeding, which we do in every school holiday.
Anne Harris, Pontefract Food Bank, affiliated to the Trussell Trust, and in Food Bank I take the lead on linking with referral agencies and our financial inclusion project, which is developing into localised debt services.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm Kat. I run Bring Me to Life Women's Wellness, and we support women in Wakefield with their health and wellbeing. I'm also one of the new VCSE advocates, and I sit on the Wakefield Provider Collaborative Board.
Hi, I'm Gail Elbridge. I work for Yorkshire Sport Foundation. I cover just the Wakefield district, and we do lots of things, but mainly we're about supporting organisations to provide more physical activity for people who might face barriers to participation.
Hi, I'm Tamsin Lim. I'm Head of Operations at the Wellman Centre. So we're a holistic centre for women ages 16 upwards. We do some work from ages 13 as well. We provide mental health support, psychoeducational support for people who experience stress abuse or trauma.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mark Delicate. I'm from Ossett. Thank you for the invite. I have a little coffee shop in the town centre, and I lead up a group called Visit Ossett, whose primary aim is to make Ossett a more vibrant and attractive place to visit and be. And I also do predominantly one-to-one coaching to help people with stress and anxiety.
Hi, I'm John Whiteman, I'm the chair of Grow Wakefield. Grow Wakefield is a social enterprise that looks at making sure that we can encourage anybody from young people to the elderly to grow food, but it's all around well-being as well. Anybody wants to have a look in a little more detail, if you go onto our website, Grow Wakefield, or if you look on our Facebook, you'll get a little bit more information. I'll be around later if anybody else wants to have a chat.
Wayne?
So I'm Wayne Kelly, Adult Learning Service Manager from St George's Community Centre, and I'm here with Jade, and she'll give you all the spiel.
I'm Jade, I am Engagement Partnership Service Manager at St George's. So at George's we run activities from young people aged 7 upwards in our Young Futures department. Our mental health service 16 to 25 is called Future Self. We run activities for adults including lunch club, coffee mornings. We've got a large volunteering programme with between 15 and 16 volunteers. We run adult education courses. We also have support services such as Help at the Hub, food pantry, walking wardrobe, those sorts of things.
That's good, thank you.
Hi, I'm Jeanette Mulaney. I am Scheme Manager for MHA Communities Wakefield District. So primarily we work with over 55s in the Wakefield District. We run coffee mornings, craft groups, lunch groups, anything and everything what anybody would like to move on or deliver. We have got some new bids coming, which I would like to speak with you. And we're doing a mental health one to access green spaces. So I'm in talks with Nostell, and we're also in talks with the new college. So looking at setting up new ventures with the colleges moving forward. We have got new full day activities setting up in new areas, Fitzwilliam, Featherstone and Airedale, to sort of connect from the warm spaces that we were delivering. We've been able to keep hold of the premises, so we'd like to move on with that and carry on delivering.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Cable. I work for Nova as a Nova advisor.
Oh, there's more to you than that.
I'm already started last week as an advisor, so I'm still finding my feet.
Alright, well, welcome along, thank you.
I'm Kate Taylor and I work for Disability Sport Yorkshire. We try and put on sport activities for people with disabilities. We're based out of Wakefield, but we cover the whole of Yorkshire.
Fantastic, thank you. Nice to see you. Maddie?
Hi everyone, Maddie Sutcliffe, Chief Executive Nova.
Hi, I'm Sarah Williams, founder and chair of the Mid Yorkshire Breast Cancer Support Group, and I sit on a research advisory panel for Yorkshire Cancer Research and West Yorkshire and Harrogate Cancer Alliance.
Hi, I'm Sharon Batty, the Director of Income Generation Marketing at the Prince of Wales Hospice. So we provide specialist palliative end-of-life care for Pontefract and the 5 towns, and we run the district-wide bereavement service and lymphedema clinics.
Thank you. Do you want to introduce?
Yeah. So I'm Andy Freeman. I'm co-director, co-director with Paula. I also have another side job where I work for Future Self, working with people between the ages of 16 and 25 to improve their mental health and well-being. That's more in a short spiel. Short speech, like me.
I'll just make that food. Right, so without further ado, Kerry, if you would mind taking the floor.
Sit to the side. Can everyone hear me if I sit down? Alright, if you can't, at the back, just wave up again, I'll project. So thanks very much for the invitation today. I've come to talk about the poverty support services mapping project, that research project that was delivered last year. It is very much of its time. So when we set off to do this piece of work around gathering the insights of stakeholders who deliver support for people in poverty, it was over 12 months ago, so we knew that there was a cost of living crisis, but we didn't know what it was going to be like then, and obviously things have moved on. And when this piece of work took place, the research element of it happened in October last year, so again, just before the winter, so it's just worth bearing those timescales in mind. I'm one of many people in the local authority who have a kind of finger in the pie of poverty support. There are lots of other key people in the local authority, and we're very aware, and it's very evident from this work, that there are many other people and organisations across the district in the VCS and other areas who are working around poverty. So we knew that this was a complex area of work. We knew it was required system-wide input and partnership working, and we knew at that point that there was an increased need to focus on the current, emerging and the potential unmet need in the long and short term, and we could see already that there was a kind of need for kind of a long-term view. So we wanted to better understand what was happening already and to gather stakeholder insights. And also, if you think about the timing, it was kind of post-COVID when things had changed, new organisations had appeared, other organisations had changed a little bit, ways of delivery had changed a little bit. So it was a way for us to gather a piece of information for everybody to use to find out what was currently happening and what people thought was coming down the line. It's really important to understand what it isn't. So it wasn't reviewing the service performance of any of the organisations or services that were delivering this work. And we were really clear that there was no new money attached to this work. So although we knew that everybody could see an emerging need, at the council we weren't in a position to say yes, we will be able to provide, to invest in these services. So we were really clear with people before we started, because what we didn't want to do is, when we've got very busy organisations doing lots of delivery, we didn't want to take their time away and then for them to think that there was new investment coming down the line, and that was not something that we could promise in the local authority. But it did feed into what was then the Residents Recovery Group, what's now the Residents First Group, and was overseen by that group, and they do kind of hold the strategic kind of gathering together of work and conversation around poverty across the partnership. And by that I mean all the statutory sector partners, voluntary sector partners, large and small. When I say partnership, I mean everybody. It fed into some of the work around cost of living, and it fed into the economic wellbeing strategy which is being created. So there were two main areas: service mapping and getting those qualitative insights to inform that strategic planning. Just a piece of work to say that we also knew that the Residents Recovery Group was producing its own kind of mini directory, so we definitely weren't producing something that was suitable for sharing with the public, and you will have seen some of that as part of the Winter Wellness campaign. We were aiming at organisations and services that deliver the services, so not members of the public, because that piece of work had already been done separately, and we were not looking at the skills, jobs, economic development area, because that piece of work was also happening separately, so this was kind of like the other bit of it. So unmet need now emerging at either population or service level, and to look at best practice, because there was a huge amount going on that we already knew was really effective, and to generate insights into the challenges, looking at that sustainable long term. So the way we did that, and I'm sorry I'm going to talk really fast because I know I've not got much time. So the way we did that was a mixed methods approach, because we knew that people were very busy and we had a particular piece of time to complete this work. So we delivered so there was an online survey that people could contribute to. So you could just put your information in, and then we cast a really wide net there, It was everybody that I could think of, everybody that the steering group could think of, and we sent that out really broadly. Some in-depth one-to-one interviews with some of the key stakeholders to generate some of the themes that might come out, and then we held some stakeholder workshops. So we got 43 people to those stakeholder workshops. We did one face-to-face and one online, and we were really explicit about saying, do you need any translation, do you need any interpretation, do you need any accessibility kind of adaptations to make sure that people could participate. We weren't asked for any of those, but we were really, you know, people came back and said, no, I'm fine actually, so we did get a positive response there. And we hoped by that we'd managed to find a way that everybody could participate in terms of their kind of desire to do it and taking part. So we did get a good response, and we were looking at the current strengths and the current challenges, unmet needs, solutions, sustainability, opportunities and partnership, working with the kind of main areas of discussion. So I'm hoping that this is big enough to actually see some of the graphs, and I'm going to whiz through some of these slides, but you are going to be shared the presentation afterwards and also a link to the report, which is a lot bigger than these slides. There's a lot more information in the report. So 35 responses from 27 different organisations and some overlapping functions. So some people were deliverers and referrers. What we wanted to do was make sure that we captured people who referred into services as well as people who delivered services, so we could see how those referral mechanisms were flowing. Lots of organisations did a bit of both. Lots of organisations provided a district-wide service, some were more regional, national, and some were smaller, as you can see on the graph there. And in terms of the range of poverty support, lots of generalist support with some specialisms as well. So some was around education, some was around provision of essentials, fuel and food poverty. Some were around direct grants, direct payments. So there was a real range, but also if you see on the right-hand side, you know, some people were providing warm spaces and they knew that they were going to be doing that over the winter already. Some people were providing cooking sessions, mindfulness, stress management, those kinds of things. So we did get a real range of people. We asked who your target populations were, and I suppose the big ones, as you might expect, were families. But working age adults actually features really highly in terms of the target population, as you expect people with physical illness or mental illness. Maybe less support, maybe less targeted at asylum seekers and ethnic minority groups and older people. But just a caveat to say, that was who you targeted, that who do you think your service is targeted at, that isn't a measure of uptake. So it doesn't measure how many people are coming through and accessing those services, it was just who do you think your services are targeted to. We also asked about who you think your partners are, and this was interesting because community organisations, housing services are featured really highly, council programmes are featured really highly, just looking at the kind of longer lines there. But health services featured really highly as well, so people felt that they had a good partnership with primary care and other health services, which was interesting because I think sometimes health feels a little bit out of the wider conversations, but actually health services are seeing people in poverty and the impacts of that on their physical and mental health all of the time, so that was good to see. Maybe areas where people didn't report that partnerships were around workplaces, schools and nurseries, which is interesting because for many, not most, but for many people, they're fairly universal touch points where you might ask for advice, you might kind of, if you're experiencing poverty for the first time, you might, that might be a place where people can get initial signposted in. But the caveat with that, of course, is that workplaces, schools and nurseries might not see poverty as their core work and might not have participated in their survey. So it's just worth thinking about those, but it just flags up an opportunity because, of course, any of you who work with schools will know that they work with children and families in poverty all the time and do huge amounts of excellent work. It might just maybe feel to them that they don't feel themselves to be that's their core work, so they didn't participate in the survey. This slide, no surprises here. At the point just before winter hit last year, October, November, there was already greater demand and people were anticipating greater demand, and that was impacting on staff workload as well as impacts on service users waiting longer. So there's just that caveat as well about how staff manage when there is huge demand on services and kind of staff well-being as well. So, qualitative findings then. There are a lot of strengths. There was a lot of conversation and a lot of reports around strong existing partnership working across the system, and I think we were, there's been a lot of work done during COVID, a lot of it led by the third sector, around creating and maintaining those partnerships and how people felt linked in. it was recognised that there was increasing access for people to access various of the services and programmes, and that there was generally a kind of support and holistic, so it wasn't kind of, you come to us for this, computer says no, you have to go to somewhere else. You know, people did take a holistic view and a person-centred view, and that was reported widely across the stakeholder engagement. There was targeted support and there was prevention-focused work, and there was lots of initiatives to the funds, grants, benefits, lots of positive services and programmes was included in the report. And at the back in the appendix there are a list of organisations and services that took part in the research and the ones that maybe didn't but we know exist. At the time of the capacity to take part. In terms of challenges, it was recognised that this is a really complex area, and one thing that I found.
So I'm short-sighted.
So one thing that I found was a real kind of appetite for conversation for people wanting to recognise that it's a complex area. It involves national policy, local policy, real hyper-local work, and there was a real keenness for people to have those conversations and to link up to other services. So it was found, some of the stakeholders said this is quite challenging to coordinate. There's maybe a lack of overall coordination, lack of overall strategy somewhere here. Not to take away from the excellent partnership work, but could there be more in terms of managing this really complex arena? People were worried about the increased need, worried about the reduction in resources, both in terms of their own organisation and service funding and in terms of volunteers who maybe didn't have as much time to give, balanced against as well those rising costs for themselves, so people, organisations worry about their own rising energy costs, for example. A recognition about that unsustainability of crisis support, so there is quite a lot around early identification and prevention from getting into crisis. Balancing the food banks and food pantry models, and that was an action that was taken up immediately, and a task and finish group was worked around food banks and food pantries to have those conversations and to do that. So it wasn't a case of like we wait till the report comes out, it was immediately people in the room said, okay, there's a conversation to be had here, let's move this forward, and that was coordinated by Residents First group. And then there were those individual level difficulties around affordable housing, and it was really recognised that some of these are outside of local control. So in terms of unmet needs, I'm not going to read all of these out, but the current unmet needs, the kind of, for me, the thread that runs through most of those people where people say we don't really know, but we think there's an unmet need, is people who are isolated in some way for all sorts of different reasons, digitally excluded, kind of without those social networks. I'm not going to read them all out, but I think that's that won't come as a surprise to a lot of people, but that did come out really strongly. And in terms of emerging need, there were conversations around people who were working poor, just about managing, and some concerns around hidden level of debts and building debts, so people had used their credit and what will that mean down the line, and we'll see some of that emerging kind of in the months to come. Impacts on housing maintenance, impacts on health and housing condition, and how that would pan out. You know, that was what was kind of anticipated just before the winter. So in terms of what our local system response is the kind of results were divided into two categories, that kind of provision of support for services to enable services to focus better on prevention. Can we share more data? Can we share more intelligence? And how do we do that? Again, across what is in fact a really complex arena of some big organisations, some smaller organisations who don't have capacity to tap into that. So how do we efficiently do that? And I kind of desire to focus on that, continuing looking at people who are in need, who have we missed, who's not here, who's not accessing that support yet, which is really challenging when you're already overwhelmed with demand, but stakeholders were really keen to say we want to keep looking, we want to keep making sure that people are not missed. And just kind of focused, innovation is really important. I think we got, my reflections on COVID is that we often got really good at innovation in COVID because people were empowered to just get up and do things, and there was a real keenness within stakeholders to kind of continue that innovation, but also to make sure that the impact was, if there's a successful service, let's know about that, let's recognise that, let's evaluate, let's, not for the sake of it, but just to say this is successful, this has worked well, and share that information around. And And then in terms of the central function locally, what can we do to coordinate that poverty support and that networks at system level? Making sure that as well in lived experience is really incorporated into policies and plans, and I think a lot of that came from stakeholders who were working with people on the ground. You know, we know what people are experiencing day in, day out. How do we get that into the strategic arena? Certainly from a commissioning point of view, and that's not just local authority, there's lots of services and funding that supports services that support people. Reducing admin input, can that be longer term, can that be sustainable? That helps organisations plan, which is absolutely fair and reasonable. Support with messaging and campaigns came up, and I think from where I sit, which isn't on the front line of support services at all, it did look like there was a fairly coordinated campaign around winter wellness, but it'd be interesting to hear from wider people about how that felt, and if that didn't happen or didn't reach everybody, how could that happen better? And then strategic support around food banks and food pantries, which is being picked up by the residents first, and that kind of integration with the system level action on wider determinants of health. So there's lots of conversation about other determinants of health that impact on people's ability to thrive, to succeed, families, children, adults, whoever that is. The poverty conversation, we felt that kind of needs to be integrated in that, and not just sit in silos. Not saying it is entirely in silos, but there was a real keenness for people to talk more about this. I'm taking this presentation to lots of different places, which I think is a kind of recognition of that. And then some comments around sustainability, really. So efficiency around delivery, maximising impact across the life course, and looking at that early impact of child poverty. Collaboration, sharing resources, best practice, how can that be done? Building models of sustainable support for service users, and that looking at solutions to exit poverty. So it's not just about kind of crisis mitigation, it's early intervention, but also how do we as a system of partners help people to exit poverty. So the overall conclusion of the research, which I didn't say was commissioned to Magpie, which is an external research organisation, a social research organisation. They concluded lots of excellent work already happening, generally good connections with further engagement with employers and private business sector was suggested as when we asked the solutions question, that was suggested. Networks for poverty support providers are really valued and could be expanded to include wider representation of groups and services. And particularly those who are maybe representing or are maybe in contact with groups that may be missing out for whatever reason. You know, we know that people are isolated or they're experiencing that kind of critical poverty for the first time. How do we get those voices involved in the discussion? I mean, it would be no surprise to anybody. I think we all want to focus on that long-term prevention of poverty, so I don't think that's any surprise to anybody, but that did feature really strongly, and look at those long-term actions. As well as the kind of need to mitigate the immediate crisis. And we deliberately didn't talk about we deliberately didn't focus on the kind of jobs, economic development, that kind of thing, because that was already happening elsewhere, but it was raised by stakeholders, so it is reported that it's really important to focus on that and how do we support people to exit poverty, whatever that means in a holistic way. So this is my last slide, which is around what next. So poverty is everybody's business, and I know everybody in this room will have experienced working with people who've experienced poverty. This report is a tool, it's to be used by everybody, so this is a summary report. There's lots of actual intelligence that you might find useful for planning services, spotting gaps, looking at organisations that may be doing similar things or completely different things that people might want to link up to. There's also policy links, and this can be used if you wanted to apply for funding. This is an opportunity. If you find it useful, then it's there for everybody to use. It's on the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment website, and you'll have a link there to that, which will be circulated. It will be used as part of the basis for the Wakefield Economic Strategy, which is the council strategy that looks at the economic development of the whole district. The action planning and the kind of what next has been picked up by the Residents First group. So it's a regular agenda item there. I've taken this to all of the directorates in the council, so children's economic development, adults and health, there's another one, I can't remember, I should be able to remember. But it's gone everywhere, and it's going to the corporate exec team as well, and it's generated some really interesting conversation and some real recognition around how much work is going on and what more potentially could be done. But I just want to stress that this is not and was never meant to be for the purposes of serving the council. This was meant to serve the entire partnership as a piece of work, and we did have, we had representation all the way through the stakeholder group, and kind of were guided by Residents First group. So this is meant for everybody. It's been to the Vulnerable Adults group, House of Wars, Mental Health Alliance brought it here. It was included in an online webinar that was kind of sort of magpie band that was kind of shared widely, and it will continue to be discussed. But it is a report to be used. So I suppose my question, depending on how much time I've got left, is how do people if you've got any questions, please ask me. And I suppose my question is how do you think you can use this information and this report to do whatever it is that your organisations and services need to do?
Thank you very much. That was thank you. So has anybody got questions now for Kerry, or do you want to?
Guys, really interesting presentation. The next question for me is, and again, as a briefing senior management and other partners and stakeholders, is there a priority list, short-term, mid-term and long-term, that's feeding into the work of the various departments, whether it's public health or economic regeneration? Have you actually got to that point yet where you actually have created almost a tick list of targets?
That's a really good question, and the short answer is no. And the reason for that is because communities, environment and climate change will already be doing lots of this work, and so it feeds into and it supports their existing priorities. Economic development have got a completely different list of priorities that they're already working on that will feed into them. So it's such a broad ranging piece of work and touches so widely that it's not there to generate a kind of action plan, if you like, although it is being picked up by the Residents First group, which has got representation from all sorts of different sectors and different teams, and it feeds in and supports their work, and they are looking at that. But it touches in, so for children's, for example, they recognise that there are already lots of work happening in schools, lots of work happening in early help. So their takeaway was how can we be linked in more, and then that goes down to actually those local networks and those local organisations and those service managers, whereas the tick list for other teams is completely different. So no is the short answer, and that's why it's a long answer.
No, thanks.
Any more questions?
Where do we find the Residents First book?
So the Residents First group is a strategic group that came out of COVID. So Maddie sits on there, I sit on there. It's chaired by Simon Topham, and some advice. And it's got, I couldn't tell you the whole list of people. I think that's really an interesting question though. So if there's any questions or any kind of comments, I can feed them through to the chair, or Maddie could feed them through to the chair, sorry to kind of suggest that.
To-do list for Maddie.
So send it to me. But it's not a kind of that network, it's not a representative kind of network. It has good representation on it, but it's not kind of that kind of network, if that makes sense. But I do think there's an opportunity if people have got questions or comments or want to raise issues that they think could be discussed there or picked up, or to find out if that's already been considered, absolutely channel that through me and I'll pass that through. Is that all right?
I think what I'm trying to see a lot more of is a lot more value and a lot more listening. I think this is another example of people in certain positions actually really listening and valuing people that are giving their views. I think this, the evidence there is really valuable. Keep definitely using our work, so I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I do really want it to be used, and there was such valuable. There were so many passionate people who came forward, especially you could see on the workshops where you could see that people were just so passionate, so keen to have a say, so keen to kind of improve lives. And I think that I just want to emphasise that, because it does come through in the findings, but I think it has given a platform for people who may be a bit divorced from some of that frontline work, to show how much good work and passionate work is going on and how keen people are to be part of this organisation. So I'm staying around to the end if anybody wants to.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay.
So, Helen, if you would come on next, please. Does anybody want 2 minutes for a coffee refresh, or do you want to crash straight past? Right, 2 minutes for just a coffee break, refreshments, and
No, fine.
I mean, a barista trained. My coffee probably not just that. Are you already with us?
Yes, I'll be.
Views from charity.
Yeah.
Give you my contact here.
Yes, definitely. Do need you.
Send a training and more reports.
Right.
Strategies and big conversations on
yeah.
I can't actually see that. It's always about that using my own very much around skills. Yeah, amplifying that. Come a long way.
So have you trained?
Yeah,
It's about that one. I can, it's on an email, just.
we can send
Can you send the link? Only because, I don't know about it. It's on the JSA website. Yes. What do you do?
and if we don't, we can send you a link from the website itself.
Let me see if I can find it.
No, you know, it's always that kind of down, that it's like Spanish. You were sort of
The main we were in
So do you know what vision is?
delivering a bunch of groups.
Yeah, I struggle with that with the schools. Yeah, they always be pulling back and stuff. What's that feel like? What's that
We did have
If you send me an email, if you give me your email, I'll email you the, I know that you just trying to do it anyway.
Whatever put them up the social.
Okay, so if we can restart.
Are we all ready? Thank you. You look so well.
Alright, so thank you to Helen for coming along and explaining about the that's it really.
Okay, thank you. Hi everyone, and thanks for having me. So yeah, I'm Helen. I work for Nova, mostly in the third sector framework, so I'm a project support officer. A lot of you will know Scott. We work really, really closely together. I'm quite new to this role and very new to the BCSE sector generally, so still loads and loads to learn. I can see...
Sorry, BCSE.
Sorry, Voluntary Community and Social Enterprise.
Okay.
That's it. Yeah, that was one of the acronyms I had to learn when I first joined. So I can see that there's quite a lot of people who are already members of the Third Sector Framework here today, but there are some non-members as well. I'm just going to give a bit of an overview of what it is, what it's all about. If you've heard it all before, apologies, but hopefully there'll be a few updates that you might not have heard before, and then some useful information if you're not a member already. So, what actually is the Third Sector Framework? So it's basically a mechanism for distributing funding to BCSE organisations across the whole of Wakefield district. That could be in the form of grants or it could be contracts. Most of the funding that's gone through up to date has been grant funding. But one of the key things here is this open, fair and transparent process, and that's really, really important to all the partners. So the framework was launched just over 2 years ago, and it's very much a partnership between these four organisations here. So we've got Nova Wakefield, Wakefield Council, Wakefield Health and Care Partnership and Young Lives Consortium. And Nova are responsible for the sort of day-to-day administration of the framework, but it isn't Nova's framework, and that's a really important point to make. It's very much this partnership between these four organisations. It is quite an exciting time for Framework at the moment. There's loads going on behind the scenes, so it's not always visible, I think, to members what's happening with the framework. But at the moment, we're very, very busy. It's been a really busy period. There's discussions going on about a 3-year extension to the framework contract, which is hugely exciting for us. It would give us the opportunity to really develop the framework, make a bit more of a medium to long-term plan, put in place some of the things that we've talked about wanting to do but haven't really had that commitment to enable us to do so, and kind of take it in the direction that we want it to go in. What I should say is that the third sector, the idea behind the Third Sector Framework is that organisations apply to join. Once they're on the framework, they're then eligible to apply for any funding that goes through. So, just a few facts and figures really about the framework. I won't go through them all in detail. I just wanted to flag up the numbers of members that we've got at the moment. So we've got more than 90 members, and that number's really increased in the past few months, mostly due to funding opportunities that have gone through. So I would say the majority of organisations apply at the time at which they want to apply for funding as well. What's really important about the membership numbers going up is obviously we have our members within that sort of pool. There's a huge amount of expertise, skills, knowledge about the Wakefield district. The more members we have on, when a commissioner comes to us and says, I've got some funding I want to put through the framework, they can sort of have more confidence that within that pool we'll be able to deliver on their outcomes and their aims. So it's really important to us that we can sort of raise the profile of the framework and boost membership numbers as well. Like I said, I won't go through them all. I will talk about the 3 tiers of membership in a bit more detail in a minute. So, who can apply for the framework? So, there are 5 key criteria, and that's regardless of the size of the organisation. So, you must operate in the VCSE sector, provide health and wellbeing services and activities, and be locally rooted. And what we mean by locally rooted is you might have your registered office in Wakefield, or you might have a history or a track record of delivering services in Wakefield to the communities in the district, or you might have really strong links with community groups in Wakefield, or you might have a combination of all of those things. The next one of the aims of the framework is to sort of try and encourage and facilitate partnerships and for organisations to learn from each other, so that's an important one. And then this final one, safeguarding. So all organisations who apply will be asked to submit their safeguarding policy, but it's kind of more than, it's about more than just having the policy. So there's also a question on the application form about how that's really embedded within the organisation, how it's implemented, and what it means in real life when you're working sort of day to day with groups and individuals. So those are the key criteria for application. We have what we call a tiered system in the framework, so I'm not going to talk about this too much because it's very dry. There's more information on the website. On the Know the website, it has a framework page dedicated to it. But effectively, we have 3 tiers of membership. And the idea behind this is that organisations of any size can join the framework and then have access to the same funding opportunities. So a small organisation can join and have access to all these funding opportunities that larger organisations have access to that they might not otherwise have. I think the easiest way to sort of distinguish, we've got tier 1, 2 and 3, and the numbers in brackets are just the numbers of members we've got at each tier at the moment, so you can see that 1 and 3 have pretty similar numbers. The simplest way to sort of distinguish between them is really in terms of annual turnover. So if your annual turnover is below 25k, you'd be looking at applying for tier 3. And that's kind of ring-fenced for smaller organisations or newer organisations. Tiers 1 and 2 are for organisations with a turnover of 25k or above. I think sometimes the difference between these 2 tiers is a little bit blurry, and sometimes I sort of struggle to see it. What we would say about tier 1 is that they're very much what we call contract ready. They've got a whole host of like policies and procedures that are written but also fully embedded within their practice. And they have a track record of working in Wakefield districts and delivering on some quite hefty contracts or grant funds. A tier 2 organisation has some of that in place, but there might be gaps, so they might not have certain processes in place, or they might have delivered smaller contracts. The thing to say is that you can change tier, and that's starting to happen a little bit more. I think we've discussed this with Paula. So you might join at tier 3. Once you've been a framework member for a year, you'll get an annual review form, which is just a short form to check that we've got up-to-date information. But that's often the point that organisations will say, well, actually, I'm tier 3, but we've got this contract or this grant, our annual turnover's increased, we think we might be eligible to apply for tier 2 or 1, and then we can give you loads of help and support to actually do that. There was one more thing I wanted to say about the tiers, which was just that in terms of funding opportunity, it doesn't really matter what tier you're at. There haven't been any funds go through, for example, that only tier 1 organisations have been able to apply for. So the idea is not to exclude those smaller organisations from these chances, really. Okay, so there are 4 C's, we call them, 4 key features of the framework. I don't think I've got time to go through them all in detail. Capacity building there at the bottom, I'm going to talk about a little bit more in a minute. But I just wanted to flag up the third one, confidence. There's a quote there from a commissioner on a recent project. I think there's 2 sides to the confidence thing. So if you're a framework member, you know that any funding you apply for is going to go through this robust, fair, open, transparent process. On the flip side of that, for a commissioner, they know that certain due diligence is being done. So when you apply for the framework, there'll be certain checks that we do. So a commissioner knows that before anyone on the framework can even apply for that funding, all these things are in place. And that actually enables us to make the funding applications a little bit shorter, hopefully, because a lot of the detail that would be on it has already been covered in the framework application. Member benefits. I wanted to talk about these because I think that they're not always obvious to members, and it's very much on my mind to sort of try and make it a bit clearer for members what the benefits are, and also to work on some of the member benefits that we want to increase, really. So the really obvious one is bidding for relevant funding, and that is the reason why a lot of organisations apply in the first place. I just wanted to talk really about this building capacity. So that's one of the 4 C's that I talked about, and it's something that we really want to focus on in the coming months and years. At the moment, so if you're a NOVA member, if you're a framework member, you can apply, you can attend any workshops or training that NOVA puts on. But what we're aiming to do is to offer more framework exclusive training and workshops that's a bit more tailored to things that our members have identified and things that we've identified. So we recently had our first framework exclusive training day. I can see a couple of people who attended that. So that was focusing on becoming contract ready. It seemed to go down really well, and there's a lot of demand to repeat it. But there's a few other things as well that came out of that members suggested to us, things that we've identified as we've gone through funding processes that we think we've got on our radar. So do sort of watch this space, because we're hoping to really build on this side of things. Because there's the prospect as well of a longer commitment, longer term funding for the framework, we can start to put a bit more of a plan in place. There is work on a development plan starting now, and capacity building will come into that as well. So hopefully as members you will start to see a few more very explicit and obvious benefits of being on the framework. So how do you apply? Simply, you go to the framework page of the NOVA website, which I've popped up here, download the application form and then send it into NOVA. There is an application form for tiers 1 and 2 and a separate one for tier 3, which is much, much shorter. We are aware that the application form for tiers 1 and 2 is quite long. I think it can be quite daunting for organisations. But we don't want that to be a barrier to anyone applying. There's loads and loads of support and help for you. So if you get started and think, oh gosh, I don't know what to put for this question, me and my colleagues, we're more than happy to have a telephone conversation, meet face to face, go through the application form. There are certain questions that time and time again organisations find quite tricky, and I don't think that's because they don't have the knowledge to answer it, it's just articulating it or making sure it goes in the right section of the form. So please do use the support that's on offer. The other thing I just wanted to mention in relation to applications are that we're thinking of changing the way the application system works. So at the moment, it's open all the time. If a piece of funding comes out and you're not a member, you can apply for the funding and at the same time apply for framework membership. The problem with this is it becomes quite unmanageable, not just for us, but I think for organisations who are applying. There's very similar deadlines for both those applications. You've got me emailing you going, I need this from you, I need this document, I need more detail on that, and I think it can become quite overwhelming. So our proposal is to have windows throughout the year where applications are processed and reviewed by our panel and by the Third Sector Framework Board. And there'll be maybe 2 or 3 of those windows throughout the year. So say for example one of those windows was January to February, and you decided, well, I'm not going to apply now, I'll leave it till later, but then in April a piece of funding came through the framework that you fancied going for, you wouldn't actually be able to. At the moment you can do that, you can apply alongside the funding application, but with the new system you wouldn't be able to. However, we do feel that it will make the process much more manageable for everyone and a bit of a better experience for organisations who are applying. I think the other thing to note is that there is a difference between Nova membership and framework membership. So we have had a few organisations who thought they were on the framework, but in fact they were Nova members. So if you're a Nova member, you'll know that you get a sort of package of support. But the framework has a separate application process. It's a separate panel, a separate board to Nova. Because as I said, Nova's only one of 4 partners to do with the Third Sector Framework. The application's a bit longer than the Nova one, but that's all to do with the due diligence that I talked about earlier, so that commissioners can have confidence that those checks have been done. And then my final slide is just a few things that are sort of in my head at the moment. That we want to work on, things that we want to sort of put into place in the future. So a massive kind of thing on our agenda is increasing awareness of the framework and increasing membership of it, as well as trying to get more funding coming through the framework. I've talked about the training and development opportunities. I've talked a bit about partnerships. One of the things we're sort of thinking of ways we can try and facilitate partnerships between organisations. So that's something we're going to be talking about, I think, internally quite a bit. And then these final 2 are things that we perhaps haven't done a lot of, so I don't think we've done much celebrating of our members, of the work they do, the impact they might have in communities. So that's something I want to do more of. And I think, like I said before, this sort of long-term commitment and funding will enable us to start putting plans in place for that. And then improved communication with our members. I think at the moment it's quite ad hoc. I tend to send out mail outs when there's a funding opportunity or a piece of training, but I want to make it a bit more regular so that members know what's going on, what's in the pipeline, what sorts of things we're thinking about. And you know, I want that to be 2-way as well, really. So people have suggestions or feedback or comments, always gratefully received. And then a bit of a final plea, if you are working with groups who aren't members of the framework and you think they might benefit from being on it, mention it to them and point them in our direction, and we'll be more than happy to help. So that's a really whistle-stop tour. There's loads more I could say, probably quite boring. But yeah, I don't know if there's time for questions now, but I'll be around at the end of the session. So yeah, thank you very much.
I've got time for questions. Maybe you've got anything burning that you want to ask?
Hi, Helen. Niraj from Reflections. Did you say you're open to suggestions for the training and the workshops?
Definitely, yeah.
So, I mean, we're growing in terms of staff and volunteers. So the things that could be useful, I don't know if you could help with, but would be, say for example, equality, diversity and inclusion, safeguarding and risk assessment, monitoring and outcomes, that kind of stuff. Could you help with that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think because we're seeing obviously sort of with bigger amounts coming through, sort of the reporting, evaluation and monitoring. It's massively important so that obviously you can show the impact and commissioners want to know. But I think you're right, I think there probably is an act to it that many of us don't yet know.
Yeah, and Scott and I have talked about having a workshop on maybe evidencing impact and things like that, and writing a good case study, because often you've got to submit case studies as well. So that was one, but thanks for those suggestions. It's really, really handy. We're going to sort of try and assemble a list of ideas and work on some of those.
it's hard to support that. I think that's, you know, we're a tier 1 organisation and we create the metrics part and parcel of our board reporting mechanism. But again, it's also that we can inform funders, you know, either through Nova or other organisations. And I think maybe some people are actually put off in applying for grants where there is that requirement to actually, you know, give feedback and impact information and so on.
And the daft thing is that once it's done and it's yours. Do you know what I mean? It's your case study for sharing. So it is important, of course it is, because we'll just kind of like happily get on with what we're doing and you know, have great results and great impact, and then never tell them.
I think the thing is it takes time, doesn't it, to actually sit down and do those things, and often you want to move on to the next thing that you're delivering. So yeah, I think something around that would be probably quite useful.
I think we could potentially do a session here where, if some organisation got, so we've recently been awarded some funding, we could take people through the process of how we apply for it, we potentially put some keywords to get that, and then share that celebration. And not many people actually put celebration, and one of our kind of C's that we brought when we first discussed it, because we want to recognise and celebrate. We're all so dug into the kind of everyday kind of cold face of the work, we don't always take a step back and recognise the hard work we're achieving. Whether we're a micro organisation or we're a large organisation, it's the same thing.
Yeah, and I mean, really, that's why I can help you do that. So yeah, that's why I put it on there, really, because I feel like Nova do a lot of that, a lot of celebration of their members, but the third sector framework probably hasn't so much. So
I think it's demonstrating or making the point to applicants or people who are looking at becoming a T2, 3 or 1 is that creation of that information actually helps you when you're applying for other grants. It actually gives you that the gravitas that you can actually say that we can demonstrate through the data that we've collected. You know, where that money's been spent, how it's been spent, who it's impacted upon, and so on. You know, it's getting that message across, I think, which is the most important, really.
And actually, one thing I forgot to say is that the application form for the framework is really a sort of self-assessment tool, really. It's a chance to self-reflect. So it is long, but I think if you engage in it fully, you get more out of it. And we certainly appreciate it when organisations do. You know, I think if you're applying alongside funding, the temptation is to just bang it out as quickly as possible. But actually, more recently, you know, we've had a few organisations who flagged things that they'd like support with on the application form, and that's absolutely fine. You know, it's not a black mark against you. And it might mean that you don't go straight into tier 1, but it doesn't matter, really.
I think the point Andrew's made about collaborative approach, a collaborative approach, so that, you know, whether or not you're whatever tier, that you can actually bring something to the party that actually allows people to formulate a strategy without having to trick themselves up by using, you know, best practices being created. And again, I was really interested to hear, you know, what you were talking about in terms of, you know, bringing more tier 1, 2, 3 and you know, together, and actually sharing that and celebrating, you know, I'm just reading your penultimate bullet point, but that is the thing, is actually, you know, making sure that everybody knows that the support mechanism is there if it needs to. And it doesn't necessarily need to be Nova providing that support mechanism. It can be other stakeholders.
And member organisations, definitely. So more than welcome to come back with future updates, and I think for us certainly the deadline will be helpful, because if I've not got a deadline, it's not happening. Work best. Neighbours man. Any more questions for Helen? Thank you very much. Thank you. So this is great. We've got just over 10 minutes So if anybody, open room updates from across the district. So anything that you want to share here that you've done, that you've got coming up, that you want collaboration on, or you want people to share the news. One thing I was going to say as well, if you've got flyers for future meetings, if you've got any flyers for projects that you're doing, bring them to the meetings and we'll get them on the table and everybody can take a few and kind of, sort of share to their members as well.
That's one thing. We've done the new flyers, so it's not we stopped doing or thought it wasn't going to have to do, but
We've got 2 flyers right now.
but recognising that a lot of people use flyers, we recognise straight away that actually it wasn't the right idea for us and for me to adapt and change, and that's through seeing other people what they do. So if we weren't here, we'd see that. We would carry on thinking, oh, we're doing the right thing.
But yeah, so anything, marketing wise, I say either thank you, take care, say Jenny, be it physical flyers, links, as I say, on Twitter and Facebook group, drop us an email, and we'll share that best we can. But other than that, so on that note, anything kind of going on that, like I say, you want people to know about, help with, support, join in, go. John.
Just want to raise the awareness of the group that there are a number of local authority and health led district-wide initiatives which are ongoing, and they've been touched upon to some extent during the course of this morning. But a lot of these initiatives are reliant upon the third sector, and I just wanted to flag up that through the local authority and the health sector, there's a piece of work going on creating a sustainable food strategy across the district. So again, our colleague, Mrs. Ellis has just left now, but her and I were at a meeting yesterday talking about creating a sustainable food strategy across the district, which was led by John Wilcox from Wakefield Council. There's also some work being done on the creation of a greener and bluer district. Initially, it's focusing on the district, on Wakefield, but it is actually looking at the district as a whole, and that is looking at the Bullring, Westgate, Kirkgate, greening up the area. But again, the thing is that what the council have said, quite rightly, is it's got to be done in collaboration with other groups and organisations, and there will be a reliance upon the third sector, volunteers, to actually get involved. There's some work being done on climate change, and again there's a number of groups being established and workshops that have taken place where climate change is the primary agenda, but again it's linking into lots of work that's being done by other groups.
Gail, I think Yorkshire Sport are workshops on that as well.
So we've got we call it a climate crew or a green team, but we're actually doing work across Yorkshire and the Humber about climate related issues, but mainly relating to sport, about the impact of various sports on the environment, but then also things around active travel, about commuting to work in more green and sustainable ways. We do quite a bit around that.
So I mean, I've got names of points of contact if you want. You know, the lead officers who I've been having discussions with and who I've been talking to. But again, I think it's important that we actually get this message across. And the last thing is in July, and the date escapes me now. There's an event called co-production. It's a co-production workshop, which took place last year. The first one down at St Catherine's Church. And again, I would encourage anybody who sees that or has been invited to it to try to get along, because again, it's taking it's giving the third sector an opportunity. I think it was sponsored by Hannah Hartley from Public Health last year. I know Anna's got a particular.
Jim Leyland was kind of lead.
So I think there's a lot of work going on, and I was talking earlier to a former colleague, Mark, about what's happening is there's so much happening in the true sense of the word that a lot of it, I think, almost dissipates, and we just don't. I don't think we appreciate exactly what is happening out there.
Sorry to interrupt you. What say the co-production date was?
It's in July.
Oh, it's in July. Sorry.
I can't remember. I think it might be the end of July. I've got the details with me. I got an email the other day. I'll send you the details through.
But no, I'll make sure the link to that's in the follow-up emails. I think it's in our diary.
I think the key to events like this, it's one of the reasons I come along, is it's what we talked about at the very beginning, is connecting people. And even if it's just raising an awareness that something's happening, it's just making sure that we all know what's going on.
And this is why, and just to say again, when we do the follow-up, obviously we do the presentations and the links, if everyone's okay for their email addresses to be, and then that's ideal, then we just sort of click on who it was that you want to speak to if you don't get a chance here.
John, you know about the green, more greener district or greener city areas, is that anything to do with the Green City, Green Community Grants from Book Foundation?
I don't know. Zoe Stewart and Ellen, I can't remember the straight to mind, but there are two local authority officers who've got the lead. And it's got
this grant funding is from Book Foundation. It provides up to £2,500.
Right.
And the cut-off point is end of this month. So I'll put it on the.
Yeah, put it on and I'll forward it on. It's Zoe Stewart, who's the person who I've been liaising with, and I can't remember a boss's name, escapes me at the moment, but it's a meeting that Jack Hemingway, the deputy leader, has been chairing.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Has anybody got anything to add? Oh, right, yep.
I work with primarily over 55s through living crisis and everything else. The actual lunch groups that we used to run, we've had to shut. We used iCare, and iCare was a food provider. We took up the delivering lunch, that's my background, food. So we took one of the warm spaces up in Featherstone. So we're now looking at moving and delivering lunch groups for ourselves, but in new areas, rather than using iCare and having rents and things like that. So we're new areas, so we are looking for anybody who would like to help. So if you've got somebody that isn't 55, or if you come across members that are 55 or over, but would like to come along and sort of help contribute and help deliver. We're running the groups for a full day, so we're looking at doing activities as well. So if there's something that you'd like to help or feel that you'd be interested in joining within that group setting, we'll welcome anybody. It's just trying to get these areas, but I know we struggle with transport, which I think a lot of people will understand. We're doing some collaborative work with within Fitzwilliam, the train station. Most of you might come across Morris in your class. Basically, Morris runs a Friends of Fitzwilliam Station. If you are arty and things like that, he has poster cases and he showcases artwork up. So we're doing some work with him on that. So he's looking for help in delivering that. So the young children and stuff like that, if they're doing art, he will quite happily help and showcase that for you.
What's the best way of people contacting you about what they can offer? And
anything, just on my email, use my email. We've just put our newsletter out, so we do a quarterly newsletter with what we've got coming up and moving forward. Can share the newsletter with any of your organisations that what we're delivering. or if there's something, a project that you'd like to deliver, and sort of help that way as well.
I think it's a case of us putting out on social media.
Yeah.
On there,
Yeah, we are on
especially the
Facebook,
newsletter as well.
Yeah, we do have Facebook page and things like that, but so it's all new. New staffing structure as well at the powers that be. So I've got a new area regional manager coming on board. So you might want to come and sort of start connecting as well. And the reason I want to speak with John as well is I've just managed to get a bit of funding through Lloyd's, which is based in London. It was through a member of our staff.
Sorry, would you mind? Sorry to cut you off. Is it alright for you to have that conversation with John? I'm just conscious of time.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
We'll share whatever. Niraj.
Yeah, sorry, I'm Niraj from Reflections. So try and quick. Sorry, I didn't know. I'm sorry, I was at school, so I don't know who's in the room, but we've completed successful projects with young people. So our core service is drug and alcohol treatment, but we've been talking to young people about antisocial behaviour, crime, drugs, alcohol, vaping, anger, violence, aggression, social media, all that kind of stuff. And our projects have been really successful, and we're going to have a lot more in the academic year. So we've been working with 12 to 18-year-olds. I mean, the current cohort's actually primarily between 12 and 14. That's gone really well. Wakefield College, we're running projects in the year with 15 and 16-year-olds and up to 25 as well. So it's almost a request, if you know any cohorts of young people out there that need support, we can come in and do that. So we're using lived experience, we can kind of quickly break barriers down and work with them and try and educate them and provide diversion activity. We've also got some of the mental health fund, the community mental health fund for the green spaces, and we're looking at collaborate with organisations. So the plan is to access green spaces around the district for sport and art in park. We've already got Pulse Reflections on board. Gasp, he ran it first. I invited Paula to see if they want to join us as well. But depending on where you are in the district, we'll pick a local park and we can join our cohorts together and help merge cohorts, help each other basically. So if you're interested in that, something like cheers.
I'm Nostal on that one as well.
Yeah.
Because I'm doing a bit with Nostal for help with green spaces.
Yeah, I'll do that one, cheers.
I think this is exactly what we're trying to generate. We're trying to help that, trying to get the connections. There's already connections coming straight away, so this is the whole purpose of this entity being here. So it's good to see.
Maddie, thank you. Oh. No
well,
pressure.
I'll turn camera, don't worry about it.
Super quick, I'm conscious of time. There's quite a few grant pots coming up. They are all going to hit at a similar time, and it's largely unavoidable. We'll do our best to stagger things, but they are coming. There's a small pot of core funding, so as unrestricted as we can make it. There's a larger pot around environmental projects, working with the council. There's another reasonable pot coming from health and social care, but that's really quite vague. That's very early stages, so that will be themed in some way. They're through Nova. The council will be launching their SPF funded grants, and it's a pot of 400,000, and it's for volunteering or social action, which pretty much covers everything. So that'll be one to watch. And then Kat's not here today, but WDHCS/Prosper are launching their grants this summer as well. So just a few things to look out for, and we will do our best to stagger them where possible, but they are coming.
I was going to say, May left me in bed for 3 days at the end of it.
You did?
Is that through the framework?
All the Nova ones will be through the framework, the council ones are not, and I'm assuming Prosper's are not, but we've not had that discussion. So the three, the core funding, the environmental and the health and social care are. So,
And what we'll do if we see them again, we'll put them through the Connecting Wakefield Twitter certainly. I'm trying to
It'll
remember
be all over Nova's website.
and they'll be all over,
on
yes,
there.
we'll share it.
So, yeah.
Comes through as well. Thank you for that. That's what I was really hoping that was what you were going to say. Kat, do you want to say anything quickly on the board that you're on? Have you been to a first meeting?
You put me on the spot now.
You
Yeah,
are?
I have been to a first meeting. So the Wakefield Provider Collaborative is bringing together providers in the district that, with an aim to reducing health inequalities. So there's NHS, there's community mental health teams, there's GPs, and then my role is to be the VCSE advocate. So it's not to represent the organisation that I work with, it's to represent everybody. But I'm sure we can do something a bit more, just to explain a bit more about it. There's loads of new roles that have come up on different boards, but it is just from, it's only been going like 2 months now, but it is really, really good. I'm actually like, not surprised, but how interesting it is to listen to everybody and get that feedback and really build better connections and work together. And there's some really good stuff going on already. So
trying to use more VCC advocates and trying to generalise summary of what the meeting will be about would be really beneficial for this group.
Yeah, and I think a key thing from the network meeting that we had the other day was that although all the boards are very different, like I got the opportunity to feed into another one off the back of feedback of somebody else as well. So, and these roles are backfilled as well, so you do get paid for attending, which is always a good incentive. But yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions, but Maddie might be best. So yeah.
I'd love to see that there's a full holistic approach in terms of not just certain sectors, a full range of people attending.
Yeah.
So you get different views and different angles from different reasons.
Definitely, yeah.
And that's exactly what I want.
And the really sort of encouraging thing from the update meeting that was had this week was how welcome the roles have been of the VCSE advocates by the other parties.
Oh, definitely, yeah. There's definitely that, because we always feel that disconnect, don't we, with voluntary sector and statutory services. There's always that, oh, they don't listen to us, and they really do want our input. So I felt very welcome. I think everybody else has as well.
I think the tide is changing. I think that connection, that binding, I think COVID's helped massively because of that.
Yeah.
But, I think the tide is changing and it is gradually getting closer. There'll still be a slight disconnection, that's always happened, but
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a lot closer than it has been in many years before.
Yeah, and
so.
this initiative is just wonderful for making that happen as well. Like,
I really want to, my next kind of mission is to get rid of the term third sector and just use VCSE, because actually why we call the third sector when we do so much. I mean, I'm semi-joking, but now I've said it out loud. So thank you for that, everybody. August meeting is, I just want to test the water really on availability in August. So it'll be the first Thursday again, which I think is the 3rd. Are people around, or are people away? What's the kind of feeling in the room? Do you want an August meeting, or do you want obviously we're already only ever once every other month, so...
I think there's so much going on.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not affected by children's school holidays or whatever, but I think there's so much going on. I've said it in a meeting the other day, you know, I think, you know, we need to keep the ball rolling.
Perfect, thank you.
Is everybody
We'll get
okay
that
with that?
confirmed. Location-wise, any volunteer hosts to have us? Yeah? Oh, you're Danielle, aren't you?
Yeah.
Right, we were there a few months ago, but thank you. I know Featherstone Rovers have, we almost have behaved really well, because Featherstone Rovers have said that we're welcome back there as well. So well done, everybody.
If there was one time before, I know one that, as of yesterday.
You what, sorry?
I know a place as of yesterday that put us out, so we could, I'll speak to you about it. I ain't told you yet. So, nobody can tell us for there's St Mary's in Pontefract.
Yes.
Oh, right, okay.
Mark Brendan's not here today, but I can have a word with Mark. I'll see him on Sunday.
You do so.
See Wakefield for the Taylors
Yeah. So like we said before, really keen to get all across the district to make it as accessible to
I mean, that might be the presentation again on the Community Foundation to an audience of about 60 to 70 businesses and individuals a couple of weeks ago, which I think would be interesting to, you know, sorry for using the word third sector, but to fellow colleagues.
Yeah. No, and that is something, one of the, sorry, we will conclude now because so I'm very conscious that you're all very busy. But I think for the November meeting, I've got a lady called Claire Sutherland linked to the presentation. She is the woman behind We Are Wakefield, which is this book for the business sector.
Yeah, well, Claire was at that meeting.
Oh, right, okay. So
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so, yeah. So just say thank you very, very much. Thank you especially to our speakers. Great presentation, it was very informative. Thanks all for your input and